All right, what's going on, Banter fan? Welcome into today's edition of In the Game. I am your host, Hustle, and as always, we'll be diving into the NFT gaming sector. And I'm happy to be joined by Brian Evans today, another brilliant mind in the crypto, Web3 gaming, and NFT space. And we're going to really just dive into the current state of the markets. We're seeing some bounces across the market. What's kind of happening across the markets. We're going to talk about our ideologies on NFTs and the future of crypto gaming as well. So, Brian, how are you today?
Hey man, doing good. Glad to be here. Awesome show. I'm a watcher as well. Yeah, doing very good. And
I
nice action on the markets today. So always a good day when that happens.
Yeah, for now it's looking good. Let's
For
hope
now.
it sustains itself. Yeah, let's hope it
Yeah.
sustains itself. We'll talk a little more about that here in a second. But for anyone who might not be familiar with your background or how long you've been in the space and how you got into Web3 in general, or what strikes your motivation and your passion for the gaming side of things, could you kind of introduce yourself for those who might not be familiar?
Yeah, for sure. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years, which is I'm probably most well known for. I was on the Inc. 500 at one point, had a marketing agency that's transitioned now, but into more of an investment Web3 company. But at the time, we were doing Web2 marketing, advertising, PR from anyone from A-list celebrities to household name mobile apps and video games. So I got my first exposure to video games, doing user acquisition for some of the biggest games like the Candy Crushes of the world, helping them get millions of users. From there, went on to e-commerce, digital publishing. Had a publication, still have it, called Influensive before the whole influencer movement really caught on. We had this publication called Influensive. It was kind of an early Forbes, early entrepreneur magazine, early Inc. magazine. Had millions of readers a week at one point.
Wow.
So it was in the digital publishing space. That led me to writing for a lot of other publications. Actually, which is what got me into crypto originally. I was writing for Forbes and Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur, these kind of sites back in 16, 17. Before people thought Ethereum was like a virus or something, and Bitcoin was like this wild scam or something, and it was just like educating people, like, no, that's not the case. Like, it is this real thing, and like and I was really focused on the real world use cases and how this could help these big industries, and for that perspective, wrote about it early on. These days, more or less doing angel investing. I also have a company called Reblock Ventures that's sort of a VC in the space. We do everything from equity to token deals. Working with a hedge fund as well to Sweden and Singapore. Have a number of other projects. I actually have my own Web3 game that I'm building called Alpha District. It's still in stealth mode, so it's nothing online about it yet. But we have some very notable investors in the space that'll be announced later this year. There's a very famous indie game studio doing actual game development. Have a collective called Affinity Collective, which is kind of a mastermind style collective, and a number of other things in the space. But mostly really just super focused on the crypto space the last 5-6 years, as well as NFTs. I was early in NFTs. Um, and Really love the use cases for gaming specifically. I just think it's the most amazing. I was a gamer. I kind of have a similar story as Vitalik. Early on, before my marketing agency, I was playing games like World of Warcraft, and I was thinking to myself, I am just wasting my time here. After a while, first it was fun, then it was like, what am I doing? I'm just wasting my time. The only real value you're getting out of it is like fun, and maybe you could sell it later on some black market or something if you wanted to sell your account or whatever. But when NFTs kind of clicked in my mind, I was thinking to myself, man, this is the most amazing use case for games, because now we can digitize these assets and own our game character, own our progress, own other world elements, things like that. It just clicked for me, and I've just been heavily focused on that kind of ever since.
Yeah, I love the background. It all adds up to what you're doing, and I love what you're doing with your future game and the Affinity Collective as well. So
Yeah, thanks.
really excited to see how those unfold. But what you
Absolutely.
said at the very end, I relate to that so much, and that's what really caught my eye for NFT gaming as well, because
Totally.
I was on the esports side of things, and so not
Okay.
only was I competing for money on games like Call of Duty, for example. So that all I was always kind of playing to earn in a way.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was a different term of play to earn. I was competing to try
Totally.
to to earn money in these games. But on top of that, yeah, every time you finish up a game or you move on to the next Call of Duty game, you look at your inventory and you can't
Yeah,
do anything with it.
I know.
you do feel like almost that it's wasted time. No matter how much fun you were having on the game, you can't
Yeah.
sell those skins, which should be considered rare in some instances, or like the gold camouflages that you unlock, as you mentioned, owning your progress in the game. So we
Yeah.
definitely, line up in that ideology. And when was the first time that you saw NFT gaming as something that could arise? Like, when did that catch your eye?
I would say, I wasn't in CryptoPunks from an early standpoint. I got into Bored Apes very early, just general NFTs. But as I kind of realized what the concept was, probably 6 months predating Bored Apes. When would that have been? It was during COVID for sure, and I knew about the concept before, but it really clicked for me as I was seeing these projects launching, and I'm saying, man, this is just the early stages. And unfortunately, I know a lot of gamers. And because I was one myself, and we had it's great to see the exposure we've had from play to earn. It's amazing to see what the capabilities are, what's possible. But a lot of gamers, and this is a good thing, and in the end, it sounds bad at first, but a lot of gamers are like, we don't want Web3, we don't want NFTs, we don't want crypto. Most gamers, if you ask, do you want that, they'll actually say no because of, and I'm sure I actually have heard you probably talk about this before too, but because of their exposure to Web3 is like these not really great, just mash click kind of games that are out there
Yeah.
that have gotten traction because they're literally paying people to play the game. It's not really a fun game. Nobody's really playing those games because they're fun, which is also what we're doing with our game. We're first and foremost building a fun game, but I really hope more and more people in the space really focus on building games that people want to play and having the Web3 elements and having the NFTs and having crypto, blockchain, et cetera. They'll eventually, the masses, I think, will realize, wait, we can have our cake and eat it too. We can have great games, we can have awesome games, and we can have all these cool Web3 elements that are going to make it actually worthwhile if you're not a competitive gamer. Because yes, nowadays competitive gamers can go to tournaments, as you know, and make money to an extent with endorsements and streams and things like that. But if you're not like a competitive gamer, the average gamer, I think what Web3 enables is that the average gamer eventually, maybe in the next couple of years or sooner, will be able to make money, as well as save their characters and all these other great use cases that we see. So that I'm kind of really excited about that. I'm more excited about what benefits the average gamer than what benefits the massive guys, the huge, because they can already do things. They can already build a following and make money in
Right.
different ways. So I'm more bullish about what can benefit the masses, which is then good for all of us, I think, because it legitimizes the use case and it brings it to the forefront. Then you're going to see, not that we necessarily want this or don't want this, but the Blizzards of the world can't ignore it because it's something that everybody wants. So if they don't have it, it's going to be, well, why don't you have this? And I'm going to play another game instead. That's another shooter or another, MMORPG that does have these elements. So I think we're eventually going to see that.
Yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic with the fact that all the first games, they weren't built to be a fun game. They
No,
were literally built to.
unfortunately.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, but at the same time, it was the first iteration of these NFT games, and we see the future of it materializing much further into a game that's primarily fun, that you
Yeah,
can also have earning mechanics. I think the earning mechanic was put first in a lot of the
yeah,
initial ecosystems that really hit the stage, whether it was Axie Infinity, Pegaxy, a couple of these big two-token economics games that really went through hype cycles but then
yes,
really died off because of the inflationary metrics. And really, it was a bunch of FOMO, people just buying in
totally.
because of the earnings capability. And they spend their time on these games as if it's a job, not
Oh,
as
for
it's
sure.
a game, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and then if you look back in history, it's the same thing kind of repeats itself. We saw the same in the sort of the ICO days of crypto, where there was a lot of junk kind of came to the market, and it was just about making money, and they had the use case in the background, but it was really about founders and projects making money, which is I think kind of what we saw here a little bit. But what changed and what improved, I think, was that we saw the possibilities, a bit more, with NFTs and Web3 with the games. But even the .com era, if you think back, I'm not sure how old you are, but if you think back, I was kind of young for it too. But I remember a little bit, and I've read obviously back now. But the .com era, it was kind of the same thing. There was a lot of different things, and very few survived, and the best of the best kind of rose to the top. And I do think that history lesson kind of repeats itself, which is good and bad in a way. It gets rid of the junk, and the best use cases kind of go to the top. So. Um, either way, yeah, extremely bullish about NFTs and games. I also think there's some other interesting things that are happening. Soulbound tokens, for instance, could be really interesting. I think it's gimmicky right now for universities. Potentially might have a good use case for them, though. But I think there's other concepts that come, because you think about Soulbound tokens, we knew about this in games 15, 20 years ago. There were Soulbound tokens in games where it was like you got an item in the game and no, you couldn't trade it with anybody else in the marketplace. So these concepts are actually coming from games, which is very interesting. That we're now seeing blockchain protocols adapt these solutions from games, which is good for the games, because if we can do more on the blockchain and decentralize, I think it's good. And that's the other thing, is decentralization in games in the future. I've played a number of games. I'm trying to think of a good example, but there's been a few games that they stopped supporting, right? And that always sucks, where it's eventually it's kind of end of life for the game, and you can't really update your assets, and there's no more updates if you don't have the right operating system, the right PlayStation version, etc. You're done. So that kind of stinks. I think Gala and some others are working on that. I think they're one of the closest as far as I know, and I think they recently had a partnership with some big Fortnite or something like that. So I could see in the near distant future, real decentralization happening to games, which I would personally like to see as a consumer and an investor. So that could be cool as well.
Yeah, I agree. And what you're referring to, they one of their games, Grit, which is a battle royale
That's it. Yeah,
similar to Fortnite, they're
that's it.
launching on the Epic Game Store,
That's
who
it. That's it.
also they launched Fortnite. So I completely agree. And we're seeing some
Absolutely.
stats here. And these blew my mind seeing, and I've always said, real gamers, once NFT gaming materializes, it's not going to matter whether Bitcoin's at 60K or 20K.
Makes
That's
no
not what
difference. Yeah.
the casual gamer is going to care about. As long as the in-game elements aren't termed as, really what turns gamers off right now is NFTs. They think NFTs are a
Yeah.
scam. They've had a bad
Yeah.
experience with an NFT game, as you said. I think if we get around to calling them in-game collectibles, something like
Yes.
that,
Yes.
coining the term something different, then that will thrive and bring more Web2 gamers to the market whenever it's not so reliant on the price of the market or a token. And as we're seeing here, gaming is in a bull run all the time right now, especially
Totally.
it's overtaken both the music and the movie industry as far as revenues. There's 1.5 billion tweets about gaming this year, which is a 36% increase in last
Wow.
year. Revenues to pass 200 billion for the first time in 2022, as well as gaming making up 52% of all blockchain activity. And at first, you have to kind of like take a step back and you're like, is that accurate? But when you think of how many clicks are in these games, and having played some of these games,
It's massive.
the amount of signatures and transactions that go into every time you play the game, it totally makes sense. And then on top of that, in a bad climate in 2022, as opposed to last year, we're seeing VCs gaming investments go up out and already outpacing 2021's total by 33%. So all of these stats just make me even more bullish on the future of NFT gaming. And with your investor
sure.
hat, on, with VCs almost doubling down this year in a bear market in 2022 on Web3 gaming. Does that make you as well even more bullish on the future of the space? Not only that the hype cycle already passed, but that VCs are also willing to almost double down their bets this year in an effort to bet on the future of Web3 games.
Yes, it does. I mean, I'm a contrarian investor, so what that kind of just means is I tend to do the opposite of what the masses do, which is what, if you look in history, the not necessarily smartest, you could also lose your shirt doing this. If you take the safe route, you tend to, you'll see a little bit of pump in the bull markets, and you'll see a decline in the bear markets. If you take the contrarian approach, which is go heavy in the bear markets, and bet on what you believe in, what you have strong conviction for, and thinking for the future. Because think about this. You asked about the investor hat. If I'm investing at the peak of a bull market of a new all-time high, I have to be, and especially with some of these investments, as a VC, anyways, you're getting tokens over a long period of time, like an equity vest kind of thing, right? And then there's obviously, if you buy off the market, that's a little bit of a different scenario. But you're basically betting that in 12, 18, 36 months, 24 months, whatever your vest terms are, that it's going to be better than where it is today. So you actually have to think ahead in the future of where could this be going. So I'm always thinking for the future. And when I see stats like this, I see the incline in the stats, that makes me very bullish on the space. So I'm actually heavily investing, heavily looking for deals in the gaming space. There's a lot of good stuff out there. I think, for the average person, you have to be very careful because, obviously, investing in a bear market, things can go down a lot more. We could be a lot worse. We had a pump recently, but things could go down a lot more. But if you're a long-term thinker, if you have 5-10 years to really hold on these things, and you believe in the Web3 space, in gaming space, I think we could be looking at something great in the future. Also something to think about for these games in the communities around them is you're not only betting on the technology, you're betting on the communities, the die-hard nature of these communities with these games. It's a little bit different than, yes, you can have a Call of Duty fanboy or something that really loves Call of Duty, but they're not going to have anywhere near the conviction and the dedication and the commitment to a protocol as they would if they're like owning a piece of it with the tokens or the NFTs or literally having a piece of it. You can't do that with Call of Duty. You can have your skin in the game, you can have your gun, you can have same thing with World of Warcraft. You can have your character that you've progressed over 15 years or whatever, but you can't really own it. You can't own a piece of it. You don't get anything if the company does well. You don't get anything if the game does well. So this is a new ball game. This is allowing people to like own assets of the game, own little pieces of the games. I think we're going to see this in the film industry too. In fact, I know we're going to see this in the film industry as well. It's a good parallel, I think, there. The other thing with games too is naturally with games, we play games partially because we want some sort of escapism from reality. So to your point about calling them NFTs or something else, I think that's a really good idea because when people are reminded of the real world or reminded of responsibility, money, things they have to do in the real world, sometimes they don't want that when they're playing games. And I know that
Right.
from experience as a gamer. I want to escape into World of Warcraft and play and just immerse myself and not think about money, not be reminded of how much money I'm making or losing or whatever. So we
100%.
have to in a way give them the benefits of those things, but not constantly remind people that this is a dollar value. You're doing this to make money. Even the play to earn concept is flawed in that sense, because if you have gamers that 80% are playing for escapism and they're reminded of earning all the time, it kind of defeats the purpose. And then you just get like professional players that are only playing to earn because they're, in a third world country or in a country that the amounts make sense for them to do that, et cetera, or they're on a team or whatever. So anyways, yeah. Long story short, yeah, I think I invest in the markets when I always think about the future. I don't think about where we are today. I think about what are the
Right.
trends looking like and where are we going to be in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, et cetera. So that's kind of how I look at things more or less.
And I loved you termed the community aspect. It's so big in gaming. Every major games player base is their community. It might not be
Yeah,
Discord servers and all these groups inside of gaming, and there definitely are. But it's not like the Call of Duty Discord server is like the hub for the
no,
community necessarily. You just hop online and you play with your friends. But what we've seen here with all these games is this is just Pegaxy's user stats, for example. Once the game becomes unlucrative, people just leave. As
yeah,
you see that the orange line is users. I mean, the users just leave the game because it's not really a game. And as you said, you play these games to escape realism and like reality. You want to indulge yourself into these economies, but it's another financial burden when you have to worry about the volatility of your assets or the economy. So if we can find those mechanics to make it more like traditional gaming, where you can buy battle passes like in
yes,
Fortnite or Warzone, microtransactions with skins, but just allow them to retrade them. That gives players back the keys to those assets, and they feel even more connected to the product. Like I would imagine I would still be playing Call of Duty all the freaking time if I could trade my assets, right?
totally.
It would be at that point it would be my favorite NFT game because it's relatable. I've played it my whole life, and I would be able to actually monetize potentially some of the time that I put in to earn those assets. So yeah, I completely agree.
And if you think about this chart, okay, they're basically you have user growth when the prices are doing well, and then it declines, as you said. Imagine a future where we have a game that's actually super fun and has the kind of incline as like a World of Warcraft or a Call of Duty and these elements. We're going to see this absolute parabolic movement, I think, with the gaming space when that happens, and that's just really about. And I think there's a few games doing it, like Big Time is one
Yep.
that they're kind of trying to be the World of Warcraft of Web3 gaming. And there's community I think you were talking about it on one day on the show. Wazder's a really good platform for like community building communities around gaming.
Yep.
So I think all the tools and the things we need are happening. It's just a matter of time to. And I'm an investor in Wasder, by the way. I actually think it's a really
Oh,
great
that's
idea.
awesome.
So it's yeah, I'm bullish on the space with all that kind of happening at the same time. It's really nice to see. So yeah.
And it's all the elements that came across. So I loved this tweet too, which kind of alluded to the subscription model back in 2004 that World of
Yeah.
Warcraft rolled out. Then League of Legends said we're going to make it free to play. And
Yep.
everyone kind of bashed them at the time. They thought it
Yep.
wasn't going to work and that the free to play model was flawed. But now
Yeah.
all the best games in the world are free to play. Then
For
Clash
sure.
of Clans, as they say, pay to win, which is really just the microtransaction heavy side of things, where you could level up your bases very quickly if you were willing to spend some money. Overwatch with the loot boxes. And then, as we just talked about, the battle passes in Fortnite. And this is from an Illuvium staff member, but Andrew's super bright. And as he says, in 2022, Illuvium is play and own. And I would
Yeah.
term that as all of these kind of in a ball, like bundling it up into one ball, but then just giving the ownership of it all back to the players, because that's what we're adding up to in the future of this industry. And I want to ask you, as far as NFT use cases that aren't in gaming, I know we're big NFT enthusiasts in general. Where do you see some of the biggest use case applications for maybe a traditional business to integrate NFTs into their brands, into their loyalty programs potentially? And then as high up as Soulbound tokens, which you could get very in the weeds with that, as far as
Yeah.
where that could really be taken, as far as even protecting your social security number as a soulbound token potentially. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on real world application on NFTs?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many, as we know, but Soulbound tokens is maybe one of the most interesting to me. I think it's a little gimmicky at the moment, but I think, for example, university degrees could be a digital asset where it's issued to you. And the idea of Soulbound, if anyone doesn't know, is I can issue an NFT or a token to you, and you can't trade it with anybody else. It's locked to your wallet. Or your account, but hopefully they do it in a Web3 atmosphere where it's actually linked to a wallet. And that brings up another topic of digital identities, which are also a great use case for NFTs. I think, how easy is it? Do we know in the world to fake an ID or something like that? It happens all the time, or fake a letter or fake a document of some kind. Document tracking is also really
Identity
interesting.
theft.
Identity theft, yeah. So you can actually solve real world use cases with these things. So IDs, documents, on that side of things, even just from an access pass standpoint. How often do you hear of like someone going to like a baseball game or something and buying a fake ticket, getting scammed in the parking lot? It actually happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
And situations like that basically can't happen with an NFT because you can literally verify it. So you can know for sure if you have access or don't have access based on that. I think we need a layer. I think what we need, though, more than some of the use cases that are already so many, and happening more and more, and I think there's a lot of future ones that we haven't even thought of yet. I think we need, for example, in person. I know there's a few apps doing this, where you can verify in person without having to physically have the NFT on you. So kind of an intermediary app, which is unfortunate that you kind of need that, but I think you can do that in a blockchain Web3 way that still fits with the ethos of the ecosystem, without getting into centralized apps and things of that nature. We all know we don't need any more centralized apps. So more decentralized apps is of course great, just for a variety of reasons that we have seen recently with things like Celsius and whatnot. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're going to need some apps and some technology to basically help people use the NFTs and have businesses like, if I'm able to buy a subscription to, I have part of a membership club, and they could very easily have an NFT to represent ownership in the membership club. I think things like that are very interesting. Film is a really good one. Some guys that I know are working on basically if think of torrents in a way, right? Back then it was you could share torrents and share files illegally. You could actually flip that model on its head and incentivize users to share. I could share a movie with you or any piece of content with you, and actually have an incentive to share it, and the creator could get a small cut as well. You could have a very small price or a very small fee involved, where it would make sense to do this. And you could actually have content go viral just from a sharing standpoint, not even from the
Yeah.
actual content, which is actually really interesting and intriguing to think about. Just the same way torrents and things like that in the past basically had this huge piracy issue. We could actually have the opposite problem where you could still do that, still have the virality of piracy in torrents, but but do it in a way that all the creators and people benefit from. Music, of course, I think is another one that's going to be obviously a big beneficiary of NFTs and some of this technology. So yeah, I think there's a lot of real world, things like the logistics industry, document tracking, things like that. I think will have major impact in the future. And I'm actually looking forward to governments. I don't want to say regulation, but I'm actually looking forward to some sort of, some central bank digital currencies or something to kind of legitimize in the bigger players' minds, because I think the problem is always going to be with until they have clearer regulations in some categories, it makes it a little bit harder for like the big money and the big players to get involved. But we're already seeing that. Obviously, we're seeing the Adidas of the world, the Coca-Colas of the world, Nikes, in some of these major fashion brands that are now doing NFT launches with clothing items and things like that, where you can have a sneaker NFT that represents a real world sneaker. There's all sorts of fractional NFTs that are really interesting with watches and things like that. I invested in a platform that you can own a fractional piece of a watch. There's obviously some regulation difficulties with that, but as long as they can figure that part out, I think that's another good use case. Someone's doing the same thing with rare alcohol. So there's a whole bunch of fractional NFT use cases that are really interesting too.
Yeah, and I love what you said too. The one thing about memberships. So memberships, typically speaking, in the traditional business world, have been pretty easy to just get around. As far
Yeah,
back as Netflix, just sharing your password with all your
yeah,
friends, or if you think about this, and this is just so big, online education. People
yes,
pay for
yes,
courses all the time, but it's the
yes,
same type of thing. If you buy it as an individual, you could just share the login information to this course with your friends, or you could just copy it, take pictures, and send it to somebody, or whatever the case is. But if you actually own the asset that is the keys to the actual membership or to the course or whatever it is, then it can't be duplicated. It can't be replicated unless you were to transfer it out of your wallet to give that access to whatever that membership or that access is. So I agree completely. And we're seeing some of the biggest companies in the world. We just saw recently Disney choosing Polygon to come in for their accelerator program, which is going to kind of, as it says here, they're augmented reality, NFTs, and AI experiences for Disney. So we're seeing some of the biggest brands, tech companies, entertainment brands in the world coming into the space. And I think that obviously we're on the path towards the adoption of all of these things, that real world NFT integration, maybe soulbound tokens coming into play with identities down the line, as well as the integration into gaming. So one of the last things I want to ask you, because I know it's hot on everybody's mind, and up here we see everything's green, green, green. So right now in the markets, we're seeing a pretty decent rally, I would say, from where we've been sitting around 19K for a little bit. What's your opinion on, kind of the pump this week and the
yeah.
weekend pump that's kind of drawing into Monday? Do you think that this is a sign of a fake out? Do you think we're going to go back south, or what would be your sentiment on the market currently?
Yeah, one of the most interesting things I find looking at charts and markets and things like that, um, is that we become very narrow-sighted. We become very emotional. We think about short term a lot, and that's the nature. If you're a trader, especially, you have to think about short term. One of the things I like to do is invert the charts. It actually gives you a very interesting, unique perspective. I actually look at inverted charts quite often, because sometimes when you're just seeing the chart that you already know, the same thing that you've already seen, it's very easy to just fear the worst and think like that. But when you look at an inverted chart, you kind of, for example, I'm looking at an inverted chart right now. I don't have my screen open, but I see this massive upward motion, which is what would be an inverted chart, because we've had a big downward motion since November, let's say, of last year. It actually gives you a new perspective. But I do think, as we're seeing now with, the Ethereum merge finally announced, I think that's a huge catalyst for Ethereum. I'm always, one thing I don't like about the markets. One thing that always frustrates me is really hardcore maxis that get really obsessed with a particular token. I'm like a maxi of everything. I want all crypto to do well. I don't want to see like destruction of tokens and like people fighting over is Ethereum or Bitcoin better than another, because what happens in the mainstream eyes from the institutional and the traditional investors, they say we're just going to stay away from these space. These guys can't even figure it out amongst themselves. We're just going to back off, and we see that unfortunately until they get converted, of course. Then you get see more action. But yeah, I think we're at an interesting point right now. I think that I think we've either seen or close to the bottom of this cycle of this bear market. It's obviously impossible to predict the future, and I think that's
Of
something
course.
people have to remember, that past does not equal future. We like to think it does, and we tell ourselves these things as people that are in this space and in any space and financial market. We say, okay, based on this in the past, this is going to happen. But if we all had the crystal ball, we would all be billionaires already. So but I do like where we are. I think like some catalysts as well. We're Disney with Matic, I believe. And obviously then that really helps some layer twos on that side of things. And obviously Ethereum finally announcing their merge date. And then Bitcoin is kind of, we're now seeing higher lows and things like that on the Bitcoin chart on the 1 day. So I'm feeling good at the moment, but it's a cautious optimism, I guess. We could always test back lower and things like that. But between some of the catalysts in the news, so to speak, on the macro level, with the Fed and whatnot, plus some, with how Ethereum's launching announced their merge date and whatnot, I think hopefully this is going to hold us for a while. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, and I think it was a big news catalyst week for sure with
Yes,
Ethereum news and Matic with the Disney announcement. I guess my only concern, and I think it's everybody's concern to be
sure.
fair, is this economy is not going to get better
Yeah.
overnight. Yeah,
No.
this is a problem that we don't know when it's going to turn around or when inflation's going to kind of level out, and the rate hikes, it's just all compounding into a worse situation.
Yeah.
So the economics of it are definitely not getting better, but I do agree. It seems to be, I don't know if we go too much lower than, where we just were, 19,
Yeah.
18. And historically speaking, that was about a 75 to 8, 75% drop from 67,000, I think, is where we were at as well. So
Yeah.
it was quite a substantial drop. And when you compare it to the percentage dips of previous cycles, as you say, history is not the end all be all, but it definitely seems
Totally.
like a similar percentage range of a drop, as far as in between, tops and bottoms between cycles. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from here. I actually recently started DCAing into some of those top gaming coins again. So
Oh yeah, me too.
because I've been consistently DCAing Bitcoin and Ethereum, as I think a
Yep.
lot of people do over time. We're definitely banking on those types of currencies to do very well long term. But
For sure.
holding on to gaming tokens in these types of climates has been very volatile. If you've been holding
Yes.
since November, that's not been the best situation. So I've recently started taking nibbles back into the market on some of my
Okay.
favorite games and favorite
Same.
protocols. So I
Yeah.
agree with you on that sentiment.
Yeah, I have as well, and I think we're contrarians, I guess, because most people will get out of alts and they'll say, you know what, let's just wait till it's safe again. But the big money, unfortunately, is not made by doing that. The big money is made by saying, hey, we don't know where we are right now. It looks like we're okay, maybe not. Let's just go in, and maybe we're in a fortunate situation to be able to do that. Not everybody is. I also look at how fast the markets have moved. If you think about the last big rally, essentially from December 2020 to November 21 with the new all-time highs. Look at that compared to the recent drop. It was a little bit easier to do this drop than it was to do that pump. There's a couple bigger, more tougher candles on the way up, and this one kind of was a little bit easier to go down. So whenever I see a fast move, and I'm sure you agree, but whenever you see a fast movement one way or another, typically it does retest. So that's why I'm cautiously optimistic about we're seeing a test back up, because I think we moved a little bit too fast, at least in the last 3 or 4 months. And obviously there's a macro factor with the Fed and things like that, which is probably the driver, of course. But I do think, yeah, we could potentially retest. But yeah, loading up on gaming tokens as well. It's tough, because here's something for people to think about too. the winners of the next cycle may not be the winners of the last cycle. So just because
Correct.
something was 10 times all-time high currently, a gaming token even is fair game as well, doesn't mean it's going to be 10 times or 20 times or even, anywhere near there the next cycle. So you really have to think about what has played out, what are the tokens that kind of saw their day and may not be the future, and that requires a bit of guesswork, I suppose, but also looking at what platforms are coming out, who's doing things better, taking a look at something like Illuvium or Star Atlas versus like a really early Web3 game. You can see the clear difference where these are like real games that are building really cool advanced stuff, and there was basic games that may not go back to their all-time highs. So it is kind of trying to predict what's going to be big in 12 months or longer.
Definitely. And games die, the reality
Absolutely.
of it in the traditional gaming space, people get upset that Axie fell off or this game
Yeah.
died
Yeah.
and they think it's, the game's fault. But, in some of it, economic flaws for sure. Gameplay loop wasn't the most built out, but in the traditional sense, games die. Elden Ring,
Absolutely.
most recent
Yeah.
RPG
Yeah.
that came out, their player base is a fraction of what it was when the game came out because that's just the nature and the volatility of the normal gaming industry when it comes to player bases. And I agree. I think banking on infrastructure, the top gaming blockchains like a Polygon, the top gaming studios like a Gala Games, or the top metaverse like a Sandbox, for example. I think that for those types of plays, those are the safer plays. And as you start getting into the weeds here with individual games, definitely smaller bets on those because of that volatile nature of player bases. I completely agree.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's yeah, I'm taking some bets on some more obscure ones that are riskier, smaller market caps now. And also some big ones. So it's we'll see. I think, yeah, the Sandboxes of the world can still do really well, and they're the leaders, and Gala, is leading the way on like the decentralized studio, for lack of a better way of
Right.
explaining it, model. And then there's obviously individual protocol level tools and utility that I think we're going to need more of for this space. So I'm really looking for utility based utility protocols that are going to replace even the Discords of the world, because that's still centralized, right?
Very centralized.
So very centralized. So we still use all these Web 2 basically tools that are for Web 3 kind of, but we still don't have those Web 3 standards. So I think I'm really looking for those standards in this next cycle. And I think that's when we're going to start to see them. We're going to start to see real applications, even if they're not fully decentralized on day one, going towards decentralization, even social media platforms.
Yeah.
I would really love to see some blockchain based, Web3 based social media platforms going away from the traditional model. I think obviously the Twitter drama that's happening now is pushing that narrative even more, honestly, regardless if Elon buys it or doesn't. I know he said he's not. But it would be nice to see finally some social media platforms that don't have some evil creator deciding how we're going to
Right.
live our lives and how our emotions are going to be when we load Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and literally manipulating us. So yeah, I'd love to see some Web3 versions of those.
I agree completely. Crypto Twitter's huge, Discord's great and all, but they're
Yeah.
very centralized platforms. And I think that, when we move those to decentralized applications, that will just push us forward even more when we're all utilizing the stuff that we would love to. We preach about wanting to be decentralized and use those Web3 applications, but right now there's just not a Twitter of Web3. There's just not, a Discord
Yeah.
yet of Web3. So I think we'll
No.
get there.
Yeah, what's interesting too, and this will be quick, but the social media platforms that we know and love now, or know now, people, they even coin these terms and use it with pride as creator, and they say I'm a creator. And the problem with that is you're a creator for somebody else's
Yeah.
platform who's making the majority, the lion's share of the profits. So hopefully we can get to a future where we have these Web3 based platforms where the creator is actually the owner of that content, the owner of that, the one that actually makes the lion's share. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with the current era of social media. So I do hope we see that flip in the next era.
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the case as well. Well, all right, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. We could probably go on forever on these topics, is the thing. So we'll definitely get you back on another show and
For
maybe on
sure.
like a round table.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely. Love to do it.
I know you were with Yatsu and Rayan on one of those shows a few weeks back or a month or so ago. So we can do something similar. We get like a round table of guys who are sharp in the NFT gaming space in the future, and we could do that because, as I mentioned, I think we could go back and forth on this forever. But guys, if you are out there watching, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for daily content here on Crypto Banter. And be sure to follow Brian on Twitter at Brian D. Evans. As he mentioned, he has a game coming up as well as his upcoming collection, which I'm super excited about both of those. So be on the lookout for that at Brian D. Evans. Anything else that they should be aware of?
I think we covered it. So yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and yeah, look forward to it next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian, for joining me. As always, guys, play well, my friends.
Mm-hmm.